Hello. You're watching Global English Stories, where stories come to life and help you learn English naturally. Listen, enjoy, and start your learning journey.
Introduction. In May 2025, President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa arrived in Washington, D.C. for a highly anticipated diplomatic meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. This was the first official visit between the two leaders since Trump returned to office earlier that year. For South Africa, the stakes were high. Ramaphosa sought to deepen trade ties, encourage U.S. investment, and present South Africa as a stable, strategic partner on the African continent. Trump, meanwhile, viewed the visit through the lens of transactional diplomacy. His administration was signaling a renewed focus on Africa, not just for business, but also in terms of countering Chinese influence and securing energy partnerships. While the two leaders found some common ground on issues like trade and security, reports from reputable media outlets such as Bloomberg, Reuters, and Politico described parts of the closed-door discussion as tense. One of the most sensitive topics raised was Trump's past remarks about land reform in South Africa and alleged violence against white farmers, a narrative often labeled by critics as promoting the myth of white genocide. According to officials familiar with the briefing, Trump brought up this subject, referencing his controversial 2018 tweet. Ramaphosa, as per South African government sources, rejected the characterization as inflammatory and misleading. He emphasized the constitutional framework of South Africa's land policy and the dangers of reviving racially divisive narratives. The exchange was described as pointed but civil, with both sides ultimately choosing to focus on forward-looking partnerships rather than historical disagreements. This story follows the key events and outcomes of that significant visit, set against the larger context of 2025 geopolitics and Africa-U.S. relations. Part 1. The Road to Washington. The diplomatic relationship between the United States and South Africa has seen many changes in recent decades. Since the end of apartheid in the early 1990s, South Africa transformed itself from a country isolated by sanctions and international pressure into a leading voice on the African continent. The U.S. played a key role in supporting South Africa's democratic transition and has since maintained a partnership focused on trade, development, security cooperation, and political dialogue. In the years leading up to 2025, the relationship evolved amid shifting global dynamics. South Africa faced challenges at home, such as economic slowdown, unemployment, and social inequalities. At the same time, it sought to strengthen its position internationally, both as a member of the African Union and as a key player in BRICS, the economic bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The U.S. remained one of the world's dominant powers, but its global focus had broadened to include competition with China, Russia, and other emerging players. Africa, with its young population and natural resources, was becoming a battleground for influence. Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa's president since 2018, had clear leadership priorities as he prepared for the May 2025 visit to Washington. His government focused on economic recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic, encouraging foreign investment, and improving governance and anti-corruption efforts. Ramaphosa also emphasized regional security, especially concerning conflicts in neighboring countries and efforts to combat terrorism. Strengthening South Africa's diplomatic standing in global forums was another key goal. The visit to the U.S. was an important opportunity to advance these priorities. On the other side, Donald Trump's return to the presidency in January 2025 marked a significant moment in U.S. politics. Known for his unconventional style and America First approach, Trump's policies on Africa were closely watched. During his first term, Trump's Africa strategy had focused on trade deals, counterterrorism, and limiting China's influence on the continent. Analysts expected his second term to continue along similar lines, with some adjustments based on lessons learned. Before the meeting, both governments released statements outlining their expectations. South Africa emphasized the desire to deepen trade relations and attract U.S. investment, particularly in sectors such as mining, renewable energy, and technology. Security cooperation was also high on the agenda, especially in countering violent extremism and maintaining peace in the region. Additionally, South Africa wanted to highlight its leadership role within Africa and seek support for initiatives aimed at regional integration and development. The U.S. government, meanwhile, framed the visit as part of a renewed commitment to Africa. Officials highlighted the importance of partnerships that promote economic growth, security, and good governance. Trump's administration indicated an interest in expanding U.S. exports to Africa and working with African countries to counter Chinese and Russian influence. The meeting was also seen as an opportunity to discuss global issues such as climate change, health security, and migration. Media coverage in both countries reflected a mix of anticipation and skepticism. South African news outlets focused on the potential economic benefits, but also raised questions about how much influence the U.S. would realistically have, given the growing presence of other powers on the continent. In the U.S., coverage ranged from optimistic reports on trade opportunities to critical commentary on Trump's past statements and policies regarding Africa. Experts pointed out that the meeting would not only be about bilateral issues, but also about sending a broader message to the international community. For South Africa, it was a chance to assert its importance as a gateway to Africa's markets and political systems. For the U.S., the visit was a signal of continued interest in Africa amid global strategic competition. The road to Washington was paved with careful planning and strategic calculations on both sides. For President Ramaphosa, it was an occasion to present South Africa as a stable, growing democracy ready for new partnerships. For President Trump, it was an opportunity to reaffirm his administration's Africa policy and showcase his leadership on the global stage. As the date of the meeting approached, government officials, business leaders, and civil society representatives in South Africa watched closely. They hoped the visit would bring concrete benefits, including increased trade, job creation, and stronger diplomatic ties. The international community also looked on, recognizing the importance of this high-profile encounter between two influential leaders. Both South Africa and the U.S. entered the meeting with clear goals and cautious optimism, aware of the challenges, but hopeful for positive outcomes. Part 2. The White House Meeting. On May 21, 2025, the White House hosted a high-stakes meeting between South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. President Donald Trump. The encounter, held in the Oval Office, was intended to mend strained relations and explore avenues for enhanced bilateral cooperation. However, the meeting quickly took an unexpected turn. The day began with a formal state welcome at the White House, followed by a joint press conference. The public portion of the visit was marked by cordiality, with both leaders emphasizing the importance of strengthening U.S.-South Africa ties. President Ramaphosa highlighted the potential for increased trade and investment, while President Trump underscored the need for fair economic practices and mutual respect. Following the press conference, the two leaders convened for a private meeting to delve deeper into specific issues. It was during this session that tensions surfaced. Several critical topics were on the agenda. Discussions centered on the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, and the implications of recent U.S. tariffs on South African exports. President Ramaphosa expressed concerns about the potential negative impact on South Africa's economy and urged for a reconsideration of the tariff measures. The conversation touched upon avenues for increased U.S. investment in South Africa, particularly in sectors like renewable energy, infrastructure, and technology. President Ramaphosa emphasized South Africa's commitment to creating a conducive environment for foreign investment. Given the global emphasis on sustainable energy, both leaders explored possibilities for collaboration in renewable energy projects. South Africa's efforts in transitioning to cleaner energy sources were highlighted as areas for potential partnership. The leaders also addressed security challenges in Africa, including terrorism and instability in neighboring regions. President Ramaphosa outlined South Africa's strategies for enhancing regional security and welcomed U.S. support in these endeavors. The meeting took a dramatic turn when President Trump presented a video alleging the persecution of white farmers in South Africa. The footage, which was later revealed to be unrelated to South Africa, depicted violence from a different context. President Ramaphosa, maintaining composure, refuted the claims, stating that such incidents were isolated and not reflective of the broader situation in South Africa. The presentation of the video was widely criticized as an attempt to embarrass President Ramaphosa and derail the diplomatic discussions. Observers noted the unsubstantiated nature of the allegations and the inappropriateness of airing such content in a formal diplomatic setting. The tone of the meeting shifted from cooperative to confrontational following the video presentation. President Ramaphosa's calm and measured response contrasted with President Trump's aggressive approach. The incident drew parallels to a similar encounter earlier in the year with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where President Trump employed a similar tactic. Despite the tension, President Ramaphosa remained focused on the overarching goals of the visit. He reiterated South Africa's commitment to fostering strong bilateral relations and emphasized the importance of mutual respect in international diplomacy. The aftermath of the meeting saw a flurry of reactions from both domestic and international communities. In South Africa, President Ramaphosa was lauded for his dignified handling of the situation. Political analysts commended his ability to maintain composure under pressure and steer the conversation back to constructive dialogue. Internationally, the incident sparked debates about the appropriateness of President Trump's confrontational style in diplomatic engagements. Critics argued that such tactics could undermine trust and hinder the progress of international relations. In the days following the meeting, both governments issued statements reaffirming their commitment to strengthening ties. However, the shadow of the confrontation lingered, prompting discussions about the future of U.S.-South Africa relations. Part 3. Statements and Media Reactions. Following the May 2025 meeting between South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. President Donald Trump, the official joint statement was released by the White House and the South African government. The statement highlighted the shared goals of enhancing trade relations, increasing investment, and cooperating on regional security. It emphasized a mutual commitment to promoting economic growth and stability in Africa, reaffirming the partnership between the two nations despite the tensions during the meeting. U.S. media coverage of the meeting reflected a range of perspectives. CNN reported on the diplomatic strains, focusing on President Trump's controversial presentation of the video and its impact on the tone of the meeting. CNN analysts described the event as a setback for U.S.-South Africa relations, noting concerns among diplomats about the long-term effects of such confrontational tactics. The network also discussed South Africa's growing importance as an economic and political player on the continent, stressing the need for a constructive relationship. Fox News, by contrast, offered a more supportive view of President Trump's approach. Their coverage framed the video presentation as a legitimate effort to address concerns about human rights in South Africa. Fox commentators highlighted the importance of protecting minority rights and applauded President Trump for raising the issue, interpreting the incident as a demonstration of America's commitment to fairness and justice abroad. The New York Times provided a detailed analysis of the meeting's implications. It examined the broader context of U.S. foreign policy under President Trump's second term, emphasizing his administration's focus on America first and economic nationalism. The Times highlighted the challenges South Africa faces, including economic inequality and political instability, and questioned whether the U.S. approach would help or hinder progress. The report also noted the diplomatic embarrassment caused by the video incident and its similarity to past confrontations in President Trump's international dealings. In South Africa, leading media outlets like News 24 and Daily Maverick covered the meeting extensively. News 24 praised President Ramaphosa's calm and dignified response during the tense moments, portraying him as a steady leader representing South Africa's interests. The outlet highlighted the trade discussions and the potential benefits of increased investment, while expressing caution about the challenges posed by U.S. tariffs. Daily Maverick took a critical stance, focusing on the political symbolism of the meeting. It questioned the motivations behind President Trump's video presentation and criticized what it called disrespectful and unproductive behavior that undermined diplomatic norms. Editorials debated the balance South Africa must maintain between asserting its sovereignty and engaging with a powerful partner like the U.S. Public reaction on social media in both countries reflected the polarized media narratives. In South Africa, hashtag supporting President Ramaphosa trended, with many users applauding his composure and calls for respect. Conversations also centered on economic concerns and the future of U.S.-South Africa relations. In the U.S., social media showed divided opinions, with some users praising President Trump's firmness and others criticizing the approach as damaging to diplomacy. Op-eds and expert commentaries in both countries echoed these themes. Scholars and policy analysts emphasized the importance of maintaining dialogue and building trust, warning against letting contentious moments derail broader cooperation. They highlighted the significance of South Africa as a strategic partner in Africa and called for thoughtful engagement from both sides. Overall, the media coverage and public discourse around the May 2025 meeting underscored the complexities of a U.S.-South Africa relationship. While trade and investment opportunities were recognized, the political and diplomatic tensions revealed deeper challenges. Both governments faced pressure to manage the fallout and work toward constructive outcomes that could benefit their nations and the wider region. Part 4. Sensitive Themes: Apartheid, Race, and Trump's Words. During the May 2025 meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, the sensitive topic of South Africa's history with apartheid and race was acknowledged with care in official remarks and media coverage. President Trump referred briefly to the country's complex past, emphasizing the need for reconciliation and economic progress. He praised South Africa's efforts to move beyond apartheid, though he did not dwell extensively on the subject during public statements. Trump's history of comments related to South Africa, particularly his 2018 tweet referencing the situation of white farmers, remained a point of reference in media analyses and public discourse. The 2018 tweet, which criticized the South African government's land reform policies, had sparked significant controversy and diplomatic tensions at the time. During the 2025 visit, both administrations appeared to sidestep reopening this sensitive debate, instead focusing on forward-looking economic and diplomatic issues. South African media outlets, such as News 24 and Daily Maverick, provided measured coverage of the racial narratives linked to the meeting. News 24 noted that while race and apartheid history were underlying themes, the public messaging from South African officials sought to emphasize unity and future partnership rather than past divisions. The outlet pointed out that President Ramaphosa has repeatedly framed South Africa's post-apartheid era as a time of rebuilding and inclusivity. Daily Maverick offered a more critical perspective, highlighting concerns within South Africa about how race issues are portrayed in international contexts. The publication stressed the need for the U.S. to recognize the ongoing socioeconomic challenges related to apartheid's legacy, such as inequality and land redistribution, without simplifying or politicizing these matters. Editorials cautioned against using South Africa's past for political point scoring, urging respect for the country's sovereignty and efforts toward healing. Political commentators in both countries contributed analysis grounded in facts. U.S.-based experts discussed how President Trump's past remarks had complicated diplomatic relations and underscored the sensitivity required when addressing South Africa's racial history. They noted that while Trump's tone had been less confrontational during the 2025 meeting, the legacy of his earlier comments remained a backdrop that influence perceptions. South African commentators generally viewed President Ramaphosa's diplomatic handling of the situation as cautious and pragmatic. Ramaphosa's approach aimed to maintain dialogue and cooperation despite lingering tensions. His public statements during the visit reiterated South Africa's commitment to democratic values, human rights, and economic development. He acknowledged the country's painful history but emphasized resilience and progress. Importantly, no new controversial remarks about apartheid or race were made publicly by either leader during the visit, as verified by official transcripts and credible news reports. The emphasis was placed on mutual respect and constructive engagement. Both governments demonstrated awareness of the delicate nature of the subject and appeared to avoid exacerbating old wounds. This balanced handling was seen by many analysts as a positive step in improving U.S.-South Africa relations. It reflected a shared interest in moving beyond past disagreements toward a partnership focused on trade, security, and global cooperation. Nonetheless, political observers acknowledged that unresolved issues linked to race and history would continue to shape the broader context of their bilateral ties. Part 5. Economic Outcomes and Diplomatic Follow-up. The May 2025 meeting between South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. President Donald Trump resulted in several notable announcements and commitments aimed at strengthening economic and diplomatic ties between the two countries. Official statements from both governments highlighted the intention to deepen cooperation in trade, investment, and development, reflecting South Africa's broader economic goals for 2025. During the visit, both leaders announced the launch of a joint U.S.-South Africa Economic Partnership Task Force. This task force was established to identify and promote new business opportunities, reduce trade barriers, and facilitate greater investment flows between the two nations. The task force will comprise representatives from both governments, private sector leaders, and economic experts. Its mandate includes focusing on key sectors such as energy, mining, technology, and agriculture, which are critical to South Africa's development agenda. South Africa's economic objectives with the U.S. in 2025 center on expanding export markets, attracting foreign direct investment, and fostering technology transfer to support industrialization and job creation. President Ramaphosa has consistently emphasized the importance of leveraging strategic partnerships to achieve these goals, and the May meeting underscored this approach. According to official government releases, the focus on sustainable energy cooperation was a key priority discussed during the talks, aiming to enhance South Africa's energy security while supporting the global transition to cleaner energy sources. The visit also coincided with the announcement of an upcoming U.S.-Africa Investment Summit, scheduled for late 2025, where South African business leaders are expected to play a prominent role. This summit aims to connect African entrepreneurs and investors with U.S. companies interested in expanding their footprint on the continent. Both administrations expressed optimism that this platform will serve as a catalyst for increased trade and investment. South Africa's business community welcomed the outcomes of the meeting. The South African Chamber of Commerce issued a statement praising the renewed commitment to economic collaboration and market access. Industry leaders highlighted the potential benefits of the task force in addressing regulatory challenges and improving the business environment. Additionally, several South African companies reported initial interest from U.S. investors following preliminary discussions during the visit. Official plans for follow-up engagement include a scheduled visit by U.S. trade delegation to South Africa in the third quarter of 2025. This delegation will meet with government officials and business representatives to assess progress and identify new areas for cooperation. Similarly, South Africa plans to send its own delegation to the U.S. to participate in trade forums and business expos. Both sides agreed on maintaining regular high-level dialogues to ensure that the commitments made during the May meeting translate into tangible results. The emphasis on partnership, investment, and sustainable development reflects South Africa's strategic goals and the U.S. interest in strengthening ties with emerging African economies. The follow-up activities scheduled for later in the year are expected to build momentum and foster deeper engagement between the two countries. Part 6. Global and Continental Reactions. The May 2025 meeting between South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. President Donald Trump attracted significant attention not only within the two nations, but also across the African continent and among international observers. This part of the story focuses on the broader global and continental reactions, exploring the African Union's response, the implications for U.S.-Africa relations under Trump's administration, and expert analysis from credible sources. This meeting also represents an important chapter in the evolving diplomatic landscape between Africa and the U.S. The African Union, EU, which plays a central role in coordinating continental policy and diplomacy, issued a brief but formal statement recognizing the importance of the visit. The EU highlighted the opportunity to deepen economic ties and regional security cooperation with the U.S. In its communiqué, the EU stressed the shared interest in promoting sustainable development, trade partnerships, and peace initiatives across the continent. While the statement did not provide extensive details, it emphasized the EU's continued commitment to engaging with global powers in ways that respect African sovereignty and development priorities. Neighboring countries to South Africa, such as Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, monitored the visit closely. While no official joint statements were released from these nations, government officials expressed cautious optimism in interviews reported by regional news outlets. For instance, Botswana's foreign ministry spokesperson noted, "We welcome any engagement that seeks to enhance Africa's economic and security partnerships with the U.S., as long as such cooperation is equitable and respects our national interests." This sentiment echoed a common theme among several African leaders who view the U.S.'s renewed interest in Africa as an opportunity to diversify trade and security partnerships beyond traditional European and Chinese influences. The broader U.S.-Africa relationship under the Trump administration in 2025 showed signs of recalibration. After a period marked by erratic diplomatic approaches and fluctuating policy emphasis, the May meeting indicated a more consistent engagement strategy. According to reports from Reuters and Bloomberg, the Trump administration sought to balance its focus on counterterrorism and regional security with expanded trade and investment initiatives. The administration's Africa strategy, released officially in early 2025, underscored priorities including promoting U.S. business interests, supporting governance reforms, and combating illicit activities like trafficking and corruption. Diplomatic experts and scholars analyzing the May 2025 meeting often pointed to its symbolic and practical significance. Dr. Linda Mwangi, a senior analyst at the African Center for Strategic Studies, told the New York Times, "This visit marks a deliberate shift from transactional diplomacy to one that aims at long-term strategic partnerships. The U.S. seems intent on establishing deeper economic and security links with key African players like South Africa, which can influence regional stability." Mwangi further noted that the administration's emphasis on investment summits and private sector collaboration aligns with Africa's own development goals, making the meeting more than just a diplomatic photo op. Similarly, Professor James Carter of the University of Pretoria, writing in Foreign Affairs magazine, highlighted the nuances of the visit. He observed, while there are underlying tensions, particularly related to political values and human rights issues, the 2025 visit reflects pragmatic diplomacy. South Africa is keen to attract U.S. investment to revitalize its economy, and the U.S. is looking for reliable partners to advance its security interests and counterbalance other global powers on the continent. Carter added that South Africa's leadership is carefully navigating the relationship to avoid dependence while maximizing mutual benefits. U.S.-based think tanks also provided measured commentary. The Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, noted in its May 2025 report that the Trump administration's Africa policy represents a more focused and strategic approach compared to previous years. The CFR report emphasized that partnerships with countries like South Africa are essential for addressing global challenges such as terrorism, climate change, and pandemic preparedness. However, it also cautioned that success depends on managing complex domestic political dynamics within both countries. The media in both South Africa and the U.S. reflected a mix of hope and skepticism. South African outlets, such as News 24 and Daily Maverick, framed the visit as an opportunity to boost trade and investment, but also underscored concerns about the consistency of U.S. foreign policy. A News 24 editorial stated, "The engagement with the U.S. must go beyond rhetoric and deliver tangible benefits for our people, especially in job creation and infrastructure development." Meanwhile, American media, such as CNN and NPR, covered the meeting within the broader context of Trump's presidency, highlighting both the continuity and changes in U.S. foreign policy toward Africa. This visit fits into a broader pattern of growing diplomatic and economic engagement between the U.S. and Africa, reflecting a global recognition of Africa's rising geopolitical importance. Over the past decade, Africa has seen increasing interest from major powers including China, the European Union, India, and Russia. The U.S., under Trump's 2025 administration, has sought to reassert its influence by focusing on strategic partnerships with key countries, regional security cooperation, and expanding trade relations. The May 2025 meeting exemplifies the complex balancing act involved in U.S.-Africa diplomacy. On one hand, there is the pursuit of economic opportunities and shared security concerns. On the other, there are long-standing issues related to governance, human rights, and historical sensitivities, particularly around race and past conflicts. Analysts agree that how these challenges are addressed will shape the future of U.S.-Africa relations. The African Union and neighboring countries acknowledge the importance of sustained engagement, while experts highlight the strategic shifts in U.S. policy toward Africa. This meeting is viewed not only as a milestone for South Africa and the U.S., but as a signal of evolving global diplomacy that recognizes Africa's central role in 21st century geopolitics. The meeting between South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. President Donald Trump marked an important moment in the evolving relationship between South Africa and the United States. Against a backdrop of global shifts in Africa's rising geopolitical role, the visit highlighted shared interests in trade, security, and diplomatic cooperation. While challenges and uncertainties remain, the engagement signaled a mutual willingness to strengthen ties and explore new opportunities. As both nations look ahead, this meeting may serve as a foundation for deeper partnership, not only between South Africa and the U.S., but across the broader African continent and global community. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Keep learning, keep growing, and one story at a time.